Welcome to Successful Parenting, where we, Jackie Rue and Robin Choquette, share practical skills for families to build resilience and healthy connections. As practicing professionals and parents ourselves, we hope this podcast is a resource for parents to grow, reflect, and learn more about themselves and their children. Our approach is simple, tangible, and most importantly, we lead with compassion for the integrity of the families we serve. This podcast should not be taken as medical advice and is intended for informational purposes only. We love our work and we can't wait to watch families gain confidence and open themselves up to new ways of successful parenting.
Hey, Robin, how you doing?
I am good. How are things on your end?
Good. You know, it's a little, took me a little bit to wake up this morning, but I'm feeling energized. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. This is a topic I spend a lot of time on, and I think it's going to be one that's really helpful for our families today.
Yeah, I agree. It is, a topic that I think we spend a lot of times working with the families and how to manage this. The podcast today is really going to focus on screens and technology, and it's a question I get asked a lot.
Yeah, I do too. I think, as we work with so many schools and communities, one thing that has come out recently is just talking about concerns over, I'll even say what they call emotional lags with our children, both elementary all the way through middle school and high school, but concerns about, during the pandemic, how much our children were on tech and our families. And so we've seen, as we're kind of getting back to more normalcy, that we're wondering, was all that tech really helpful, or has it caused some disruption in terms of development and connections?
Yeah. I was looking at some research and they were talking several things, eye contact, phone skills, conversations. One thing that I found interesting was the spatial, being able to understand, dangerous distractions, because I think we do get caught up in that really quickly, right?
It is, and it's so true. I think social skills and connections are really something that we have to practice. They're taught, and we have to do them regularly. And even in when I'm in my clinic, we have a waiting room out there, right? And so often we'll have families in the waiting room. And one thing I notice is, when people sit down, they have this tendency to just take their phone out, whether it's parents and children.
Mm-hmm.
They're playing a game, and a lot of people, I forget what that game was, but there was a game for a while where you were just like hitting bubbles, and everybody would come in. That game of ball,
Candy Crush.
Candy Crush. Well, that was one of them, but everybody's in the waiting room, Candy Crushing away. No one's speaking with one another. No one's saying hello. And it's interesting. I went out to grab a parent, and a parent had wanted to speak with me. They wanted to leave their child in the waiting room. And I think the child was third grade. And so it was fine. We have we have a staff out there. One of the things I noticed, the parents started walking back with me, and the parent said, "Oh, wait, I forgot something." And right away, the parent took the phone out of the purse, ran back to the child and said, "Okay, here you go. Here's the phone," so that the child would have something, to do. And mind you, we were only going to be talking about maybe 5-10 minutes. There were coloring books and books in the waiting room. And it was interesting when I asked the parent that, why did you feel that you had to go back and give the phone? The parent said, well, they need something to do. And we talked about how, and the mom actually laughed and said, "Oh my gosh, that's just such an instinctual thing to do for me now. It's almost like we're anxious if we don't have it out." And I thought
Right.
that was so interesting. And, Robin, I can relate to that because I feel like so often I find myself on a device where I really don't need to be.
Mm-hmm. And it is nice. I think about what are the benefits. I think one of the things I love, I remember going interstate, going down, there was something I saw, I was curious about it, grabbed my phone, was able to Google, figure it out, right? That's one of the advantages for having the devices that we do. We get information so quickly and it's available to us. And I think it does help to broaden our understanding, broaden our education. Information is now given to us. Our social connections are much greater. We have the opportunity to know people that we haven't met before, connect with people that maybe that we've moved away from, that we can still maintain connections much easier. So there's a lot of great things about these little devices that we hold in our hands and walk around with, or our iPads, or any of those devices, and the technology has a lot of great benefits, right?
You know what? I think you're going to agree with me on this one. We were laughing about this yesterday, and this is to your point. What did we do before Waze or MapQuest? I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, I'm directionally challenged. I don't know how the heck I got around without one of those mapping devices. And it really, to your point, there's definitely times it saves times. It's more efficient. We can get things done. I've already ordered something online this morning that I needed for the office. There's times, and in moderation, I think it can really actually give us more time back for our families. And one thing, and I don't know if you saw this too, but they talked about the overall increase in technology, right, during the pandemic and after. And they say amongst youth, it's about a 15% increase.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
I know it's interesting, and we're seeing more and more children. Where maybe like 10 years ago the standard was children would get cell phones in sixth grade. We're now seeing children as young as 2 and 3 given tablet devices and things like that, and there's Wi-Fi connected, so they're in the web and they're learning how to navigate. Interesting part is some of the children are learning at such a faster rate that they're gaining more knowledge than their parents, where this is awesome, but it's also problematic when you talk about trying to supervise a child that potentially knows more than you
Right.
about the internet and sites and where they're going with it. So
I hear parents say that a lot. That's exactly like, I don't even know what they're doing. I don't know how they do it. I try to set up a limit and they go right past it.
right. And that's something we have to kind of learn about. And I think a lot of the children we see, may have some mental health or emotional issues as well, like anxiety or ADHD. What we have to keep an eye on is tech affects all of us a little bit differently, right? Some children with mental health issues actually are more prone to electronic addictions. I hear parents say a lot, all the kids do it, our neighbors do it. This is kind of just what kids do. And tech really does impact them differently.
Absolutely. So if you had to guess, Jackie, the average teenager, how many hours do you think a day, and this is not including time spent for homework and school, how many hours a day would you think the average teenager spends electronic?
I would guess 4.5.
Ooh, double that. This is what I was looking at. I saw some reports saying 7, some saying 9, so it was somewhere between 7 and 9 the average American teenager spends on electronics daily.
When you think about that and you balance that with kind of real in-person interactions, I find that so often we're with other people, but we're on our tech. And when we talk about social skills needing to be practiced, you think about how that routine can be disrupted. I notice many have a really hard time with downtime. Many have a hard time with just being on their own. But I love how you notice there are some benefits. For many children, being able to connect in different games and communicating with peers
Right.
can be fun. And I think at times,
Yeah.
I remember when my daughter was in middle school and, we went through a small tough patch where our communication was a little bit strained. I felt like anything I said to her, I got like a door slam or she just was not, the middle school ages are sometimes,
Difficult.
if any other parents have ever been there, some parents might say, oh, my middle schooler is just blissful. I remember we went through a short phase where I felt like it was hard for me to say anything. And I remember Snapchat had just come out and it was limited. We didn't know a lot about it. I remember she had gotten a Snapchat and she was in 7th grade. And I remember maybe even 8th grade, but I remember I started Snapchatting her. And for whatever reason, we didn't do it a lot, but it really kind of did at that moment. It kind of helped us a little bit because I was trying to understand her world and I was trying to connect with her. I did pair that with limits, but it was something that, to your point, where it can be helpful.
And I've got a lot of kids that'll talk about that as, Robin, I'm in a smaller school or in my school, I don't find a lot of kids who have common interests that I have. And when I'm in, games or certain things that they do, they say, I will find connections with people that I would never find. And I think there is a truth to that. I think they do find people, and they're not always, I think our fears go up that they're not truly who they are. Sometimes those exist, but then sometimes they truly are kids just like our kids, right? And they connect. And that's a way for them to connect. So I think we have to look at, I remember being with a group of people who were much, much older than you and I, Jackie. And all they kept saying was, let's take it away, nothing's good. And I kept saying, but if we keep saying that, they're not going to listen to us. And I don't think that's always true.
Absolutely. And I think you make an excellent point there. And it's one of the things I love about having this even conversation with you is because it's so much every day that we can learn, right? There's new stuff all the time. And I think this is definitely, a worthwhile conversation to have.
Yeah.
It's interesting too. I think I have been really trying to understand, and I was reading from a Dr. Turkle. She had really talked about social media and the internet is not necessarily bad, like, we're talking about right now for children. But the problem we have to be careful of is, and she actually quoted, and I wanted to kind of just share this quote this morning, it can provide the illusion of companionship without the demands of friendship, without the demands of intimacy. And this really resonated with me because I have so many people that I work with and they really feel lonely despite the fact that they're always connecting through the web. And so this really spoke to me as I was reading it, because she talks about as we gain an over reliance on digital communication, we can actually feel more isolated and more lonely and disconnected, leading to feelings of anxiety and mental health exhaustion. And I relate to this because I was like, I feel that. And I have friends that are what they call influencers, right? They have 40, 50,000 followers. Most of their stuff they're pushing out is about how happy they are and things that make you happy. And they have spoken to me on the side, and we have depression. We struggle. When we're not on the electronics, we feel empty. We feel like there's nothing. And so imagine our children growing up with this and not having the skills while the technology is coming in to connect in person. And I love how she said that because I think this is so true.
I can't remember. I wish I could remember the research, but I remember reading several years ago. This was something that I had taken back to this group of older people to say it's not about technology, it's about having relationships on technology and also having other relationships. If you're only reliant on technology to have relationships, there's where we see the higher rate of depression, higher rate of anxiety. It's not the hours and it's not about technology. It's about, can we connect outside of technology? And if we have that, then we don't see the rise in the depression, anxiety, those type, if it's more of a balance, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I also think we have to be mindful of, as our children are getting tech, as we're getting tech,
Yes.
are those skills already in place? I shared on a previous episode, when I was younger, I really struggled with like eye contact. It had to do with confidence. And so when I had my girls, I really wanted us to focus a lot and talk. From the time they were like 1 and 2, we would sit and have conversations, make eye contact. We would practice. It was almost something that it was important that they developed. And to this day, they have really pretty strong social skills. And my older daughter, even, in fact, whenever she speaks, she will stop and give you her full attention in a conversation. And
Right.
I think as we decide, when to give tech to our child or how much tech, I think we do have to look at kind of where they are in terms of their social skills, their critical thinking skills. And I think that is so key because for many of our children growing up with tech now, they look to be validated by others through likes and through comparing themselves to others on the internet. And like I said, for some of my influencer friends, most often these pictures are filtered. They're not getting an accurate picture of what really is going on. And I'm also noticing they're having a really hard time transitioning to real life activities because it moves so fast on the web.
I think that child development piece is so interesting when we start to look at that and look at the skills. I remember one parent was talking about, my kids aren't on technology, then they're bored. And I said, well, do you realize boredom helps in that space of creativity, imagination? And it had them to stop and think. And I said, you say your child's very creative and has this imagination, is more of an artistic. Do you think you're limiting their ability to create on their own versus mimicking when they're watching, YouTube or doing something like that, and really being able to develop their own style and who they are? And when I said that to the parent, oh, I get it now. And I think it's interesting to think about that in development. If we're allowing this to be always influenced by what someone else is doing, are we allowing our children to develop on their own and being who they are? And I think most parents would agree that's really important. And we have to think about, how do we model, and do we stand on our own and say, this is who we are, or do we always try to look at what others are doing. Like, are we using technology to define us and help us to be able to manage through the day? I'm not a gamer, but I know there's a lot of adults that are, and I get that. But are we spending a great amount of time? I see a lot of couples, and I'm going to tell you that's one thing that comes into the conversations. One of the partners often are really into gaming, and the other parent saying, look, I'm doing it alone. I'm working, I'm taking care of the kids and the house, and you come home and game. Like, this isn't fair.
Well, and I think it's so true. And I have a lot of friends that are gamers as well. And while I'm not a gamer either, I spend way too much time on my phone. And even for me, emails and texts, because it's made it so much easier to communicate. Honestly, I probably get work emails and messages all the time. And it's because people feel, there is, and I'm guilty of this as well. We used to have the old standards that you really communicated during certain hours, and the rising of messaging, people will text each other Sunday mornings, Saturday night. There's just no breaks. And when I was a child, gonna kind of date my age, Robin, but you're older than me, so it's dating you worse. I was telling my friend yesterday, we didn't have internet, right? And my mom, we didn't even have call waiting because she felt that was disrespectful. She felt like if you were talking to someone, you were talking to them. We watched TV shows. And really, I think because we didn't have cable, our TV shows were like, we had a couple hours, right? When they were on Saturday morning, you had a couple after school, and then the news would come on and you'd be kind of kicked off, right? So I think I had like 3 to 5 shows for my age, and there'd be breaks. Every half an hour, you would get like a break with a commercial. But it was interesting, a lot of the stuff now, there's no breaks. And so when I talk to parents about just what you said about modeling, we talk about what is, as an adult, as a parent, and take a minute maybe to reflect now, what is your relationship with tech? And how do you modeling? What are you modeling in terms of, using the phone when you're driving, or, you grabbing kind of a game or something in a social situation when you could be modeling conversations, or, different things like that. I did this parent presentation, and it was on the movie Screenagers. And one of the things, we watched the documentary, and we had about 100 parents and teens. And one of the parents stood up after, when we were doing the Q&A, and they said, how do we get our children off the video games? They're always wanting to play. What is the magic answer? How do we get them off? It was interesting. Before I had a chance to respond, one of the middle school boys stood up and he said, hey, I have a question as a follow-up. How do we get our parents off their electronics? Because we can't seem to find a parent or teacher who is not being distracted while they're speaking with us. And it was an interesting conversation because both sides had a very similar thought of we're feeling like we're not having those same connections because someone is always on tech.
Yes, absolutely. It goes back to thinking about, and this is what I ask parents, your child's on tech, look at their functioning. Start asking yourself these questions. Does my child struggle asking for help? Does a child struggle with those social connections? Can they advocate for themselves? And if that's not happening, then one, think about what is going on. Am I giving them that opportunity? Am I also, as you talked about modeling, am I modeling that? Do I put my device down and make eye contact with them when they talk to me? Jackie, you gave a great example. That was something important for you, and you really modeled that. And when we look at children, we want to think about, where are they actually functioning? Is it causing some disruption in their emotional development? Are you into these power struggles and trying to fight them off of the device? And it's really about connecting and helping them to figure out how to connect. Because I think so often we get into fights about something that's really not what it's really about, right? It's really not about the thing we're fighting about.
100%. And I love how, you've even said, if you're in a power struggle with your child, you've already lost.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And some of this, if you're listening and you have younger children, it's never too early to start. Like I said, I started with my girls when they were 1 and 2, where we started with table manners. And I think a lot of that is silly and old school as it sounds. I think manners do have a place. And I think they help you connect, socially connecting manners. And when I say manners, early in, when my children were even in elementary school, they had what's called a manners lunch, and they worked on a curriculum around table manners and etiquette public school in our area. area, they would all go out to like a banquet style luncheon and practice. And I found it helpful for them and just connecting with each other. Some parents, like we said earlier, you might have, and I had a young mom I was working with, and she had three boys. And for her, she said, it's my sanity to give them the tech. I feel like I'm too stressed. I need break and I can't deal with them. And so we incorporated more of a routine in her home that gave her a break at different times without using tech. We feel like tech can be easy, but when we build in different routines, whether it's, I worked with a family recently on a model car or doing art or projects in the home together, we find that children, although initially kind of resist it, once it becomes part of a routine, they actually report feeling better. And we've seen a lot of data on this.
Right. That consistency, that structure. And if you think about it in the home, if we have that, you start to see a decrease in anxiety through all the family members because of the structure. The structure alone provides that. And you're right. At the beginning, they do fight it. One of the things I often will say to teenagers when we're discussing this is now you're going to know what's going to happen and you get to decide what you do.
I mean, I think this conversation, as we've looked at research and we've mentioned some, and just to mention, a little bit more, for children and adults, I think the connection between neurons increases more rapidly in childhood. So I think it's more critical that we're looking at how our children, whether it's infancy all the way through, age 26, we see that brain is developing during that time. And I think it's key on making sure that our children are hitting some of those milestones along the way. And so definitely tech in when it's in moderation. And I think they say average of 2 hours a day for a middle school child and outside of school. And we encourage it to be supervised, no understand. And we're going to talk more about that in the next episode, but really understanding what your child is doing, having supervision around it, as well as an example. I have some kids I work with that love video games, and parents will report they hear yelling and screaming and swearing and like sometimes even threatening. And, they get concerned. And we talk about that's possibly a moment to take a step back and look at how that's impacting the child.
Mm-hmm. And in that 10 to 12 age, when we think about brain development, there's a lot there about those social rewards, compliments, getting those. And so that's the reason we see they really like having the followers. They like people making comments. They like people liking the social media. It really helps in terms of, those happy hormones that we get, the oxytocin, the dopamine, those type of things. So you start to see why they can get caught up in that. Their brain's primed for it at those ages. They do it, they get it. It feels really, really good.
Well, and I love how you said that, because I think we have to, have conversations with our children around that too, because sometimes when you put yourself out there, you're going to get criticism, or you're going to get the bullying on the web and on the internet and all those things. And talking about if you are faced with someone that says something really complimentary, but also if they say something not so nice, and really teaching the purpose of tech and teaching how to use it and how it can impact mental health. This is so key. And it also, I think for many families, it can produce more anxiety, because what's happened, some of these social apps and different apps and monitoring apps have become more available. Parents are finding that they're monitoring their children so much that it's actually producing anxiety. And so we talk a lot about being mindful. If for instance, some school districts use an app where every grade from every assignment comes through on this app. And if you know that you're finding yourself every time you see a grade, you're immediately texting your child and wanting to talk about the grade. And if you notice it's causing more stress, we say don't try harder, try different. You might want to move away from that. Move away from always that impulsive texting your child during the day at school, and try to think about what is the purpose of your messaging. What is it? Does this need to be said right now? Because I will tell you, the most common thing I hear from children is that they get so stressed when they get texts from their parents during the day, or when they're at a social play date. And, sometimes checking in can definitely be useful, and every situation is different, but it's how we do it and the purpose behind it.
Yeah. The anxiety for the parents, for everyone in the family. I think you're making some really great points with that. One of the things that I see, Jackie, and I'm sure you do too, parents' anxiety goes up and they start talking about, technology. And what is that creating? What's going on? They will, and I think parents are educated now to understand and know about technology addictions, and they start really getting worried, especially if in the family there's a line of addictions. If they see that happening in the family, getting concerned. For some families, it's helping to educate and to understand what goes on with the technology and addictions such as that. They get engaged, as we talked about, all of these things, neurotransmitters happening, everything's kind of connecting and snapping, and what gets released, and people really start liking the way it feels. And then they want to keep that going and they don't want to stop it. And teenagers are the same way. And understanding, somewhat similar to a substance abuse where you bring in a foreign substance into the body and make changes. Here, we're engaging in activity and then changes are happening. And we see that, for families, adults, we often see gambling, we see shopping addictions, we start to see any of those type of addictions. And this is very similar to that.
Well, and 100%, I laugh because, I don't know that I have a shopping addiction, but, you think about how many, boxes come to your front door, and it's also opportunities. Again, are children going to the store? Are they learning to ask where something is? Are they learning to kind of talk to the cashier and have manners, like, that kind of stuff? And you really see that there's so many opportunities that sometimes I think we gloss over because we're all so busy and in a hurry. And I think just taking a step back and simplifying things a little bit can definitely be helpful, because I think too, our reactions, I love how you said earlier, really, every child is different. So if you have a child that you feel like really handles downtime well, they can have conversations with peers and with adults. They know how to carry conversations. And this is key. A lot of times when I say to a parent or to a child, how are you? I get a fine, but they don't reciprocate. They don't come back. Right.
Mhm.
I spend a lot of time practicing conversations and connections and even difficult conversations. Can we have difficult conversations? Many are reporting feeling like they avoid conversations that make them uncomfortable. And these are things that are so key in development as we send kids to high school and college and on. We want them, as you started, know how to ask for help, know how to deal with criticism, know how to have difficult conversations, and also have the confidence that they can manage, because that's what's going to help them excel so much more. And it's interesting. There's so many positives, but we do see how we get so swept into some of this stuff. It really does help us lose sight of what's really important.
The psychological part of that, and it's kind of what you're talking about, of that addiction, it just feels so good. And I want to keep with what feels really good. And I don't want to feel uncomfortable. And feeling uncomfortable is not easy. It's hard. And as you said, if I lack confidence, I'm less likely to go do that. And if this is a place where I feel good, you start to see and you understand why someone would be really upset if someone's trying to take away the thing that feels really good. I'm going to fight for that. I want to keep that. I want to be able to do what makes me feel good. Why would I want to go do something that's really hard and difficult and it doesn't feel so great? And the reward doesn't come as quickly and as easily as when I'm doing something else, the thing that I love, the thing that I like and enjoy.
Absolutely. And we're gonna wrap up here in a moment. I'm looking forward to our next episode too, that we're gonna be talking more about how to understand and establish healthy patterns for families. And if you're listening now and you have concerns over, just technology in your home, signs that there's an area of concern. If you find that you are bartering with your family members about how much use they're doing, I heard a saying once, Robin, if you're concerned, there might be reason to be concerned. Are you finding like signs of desperation in the child or even in an adult in the home when there's limits being set? And recognize anytime we make any changes in our home, it takes about 2 weeks of consistency to establish new routines and patterns. When we first approach these conversations or set different expectations and limits in the home, we may expect children to have a really strong negative reaction.
Right.
If there's any signs of things like, even self-harm or aggression, verbal or, physical aggression, right? Not meeting expectations. I think many parents will say to me, and I don't think this is always the best for them, but my child's so anxious, they're so sad. They don't have friends. They need this. And
right. Parents feel guilty. They feel
Yes.
guilty and sad. You're right.
And really, right, like we always say, parenting out of that usually does not lead to a good place when we're
Correct.
parenting out of our emotions. And so recognizing that although your child may look content, if they're not functioning overall in a healthy way, don't continue to do the same thing, but start to look at maybe this is a child that, because we're noticing these reactions, we're noticing that they are struggling in different areas or maybe getting to school or whatnot, maybe it's a sign to really take a step back and kind of look at doing something different, which we're going to talk about in the next podcast episode. And also remembering that encourage using screen time for games and shows that are educational and purposeful, just kind of really looking at what we're doing and what its use. And I think I love how you said, Robin, earlier, balancing it for every bit of time we spend on tech, balancing it with a family social gathering or doing something outside or going on a walk or something. And when you are going on a walk or having meals or things like that, even in restaurants, I always encourage, when you can, not using the tech. Bring other things for your child to do. And even if they're like, this is stupid, you can still have that and kind of work through that and develop some new routines.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a good one. I love what you were talking about. It sounds like there's a lot of screens and screams going on out there within the families. And so we certainly hear that and understand, and really trying to support families. We thank you for joining us today, and we hope you enjoyed our episode.
Thank you. Robin, I might try and see if I can do a screen-free afternoon and just kind of for myself see what that does.
Yeah, that is interesting when we try to put it. I leave mine in my bedroom a lot. I just don't take it with me because I have tendency to look at it. So let me know how that goes. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. I'll see you next week.
Bye, Jackie.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us, and make sure to subscribe and like us to catch our next episode, where we will take you on a journey to find new ways of successful parenting.